with my radiator fluid. My engine's cold, so I can take the radiator cap off. Take the cap off, reach in, make sure I can touch fluid. If the engine was hot, I would just tell you how to check the radiator fluid. If the tank had a side glass, I would need to check the fluid with the side glass. Next, I'd like to check my engine oil. You pull the dipstick out. My motor hasn't been run this morning, so I can get an accurate reading. Make sure it's between the add and the full mark, and it is. Therefore, the engine oil is at the proper level. Next, I want to start with my exhaust system. Looking at my manifold, leaving my motor down through my turbo, through all my piping, and out up through the top of my stack. I don't see any pinholes, any buildup of carbon or soot that would indicate a leak. There's no missing clamps. There's nothing laying or rubbing against the exhaust system. Appears to be in good working order. Next, I want to look at my alternator. I want to look at my alternator belts. I want to check that they're not rubbed, chafed, or spliced, or frayed. And when pushed, they have no more than a 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch deflection. Alternator appears to be in good working order. Next, I want to look in here at my water pump. The water pump on this engine sits back in here. It is a belt-driven pump. Looking at my belt and looking to make sure there's no cracks, no frays, no wear to the belt. When I push on the belt, it has less than 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch deflection. Therefore, it's in proper adjustment. I'd like to now go around to the other side of the vehicle. All right, over here, I want to look at my air compressor. I want to tell you that my air compressor is a gear-driven compressor. I want to check that it is securely mounted. I don't see any visible signs of oil leaks or water leaks, and I don't hear any audible signs of air leaks. Therefore, my air compressor is in good shape. Okay, this is my air compressor. Next, I want to check my power steering. I want to check my fluid level. Make sure that on my dipstick I'm between the add and the full mark. And I am between the add and the full mark. Next, I want to look at all my power steering hoses and lines, leaving my reservoir down to my pump, and from my pump to my gearbox, and my gearbox back to my reservoir, looking to see that I don't have any cracked, broken, chafed, or rubbing lines, or not spliced, and they show no signs of leakage. Another visual look at all the rest of my lines and my wiring along my motor shows that I don't have any rubbed, chafed, or spliced hoses, no frayed or cracked wires. While I'm here, Mr. Examiner, I want to go ahead and do my suspension and my steering. I'm going to start with my shaft. I want to check that there's no play in the universal joints. They appear to be well greased. I'm looking here at my steering box. See that all the bolts are present and tight. There's no sign of any damage or leakage out of my steering box. I want to look at all my steering linkage and knuckles. I want to see that they're not cracked, broken, or bent. Looking at my pitman arm, my idler arm, and my axle arm, and my tie rod. I'm looking at all my ball joints to make sure that they're securely tight. There's no crack, broken, or missing pieces. All the nuts are in place, and all the carter pins are present. Next, I want to look at my shock absorber. I want to make sure that it's fastened both top and bottom, and make sure that I don't see any signs of leakage. Shock absorber appears to be nice and tight and in good working order. Next, I'm going to look at my suspension. I want to look at my front spring hanger and my rear spring hanger and shackle. I want to make sure that they're all securely bolted to the frame. There's no crack, weld, or repair marks to the spring hangers. I'm not missing any clamps. The U-bolts are secured around the front spring to the front spring axle and tight. There appears to be no cracks, broken, or missing leaf springs, no spread or shifted leaf springs. The front suspension appears to be in good, proper working order. Next, I want to look at my front brakes. I want to look at my airline, that it's just tight at both ends, that it's not rubbed, chafed, or spliced. My airline appears to be in good serviceable working order. Next, I want to look at my brake chamber. I want to see that the clamp and band is around it nice and tight. It is securely mounted. I see no visible signs of any damage to the brake chamber. Next, I want to look at my slack adjuster. I want to look to see that all my nuts and pins are in place, my carter pins are in place, there's no crack, broken, or missing pieces to the slack adjuster, and when pulled by hand, I have less than 1 inch of free play. Next, I want to look in at my brake drum and my shoes. I cannot see the inside of my brake drum because it has a cover, but if I could see in there, I would be looking to make sure that my brake drum is not cracked, welded, or repaired. There's no broken or missing pieces, and I would be looking at my shoes to make sure they weren't worn dangerously thin or contaminated with oil or grease. And this one appears to be in good serviceable order. Come out looking at my tire. I see that I have at least 4/32 thread in the deepest groove. There is no sidewall damage to the inside and outside of the sidewall. No cuts, bruises, or lacerations. This tire was checked with an air gauge this morning, and it is at 100 psi or manufacturer's recommended specification. Looking here at my valve stem, it's not cracked, bent, or broken, and it does have a valve cap. Moving down to my rim, I see that the inside and outside of my rim shows no welds, no cracks, no repairs. It's not bent or loose, rusted, showing around the inside that would indicate loose on the hub. Looking at all my lug nuts, they're present and tight. There's no cracks in between the lug bolt holes. There's no distortion of the lug bolt holes. There's no rust trails that would indicate a loose lug nut. Looking at my hub oil seal, I see all my nuts are in place. There's no leakage, and it appears to have the adequate amount of oil level in my front hub. Alright, this concludes my under the hood checks. At this time, I'd like to go inside and start my in-cab checks. Okay, now that I'm inside the cab, the first thing I want to do is crank my motor. I want to make sure my clutch is fully depressed to the floor. Wiggle my gear shift to make sure that it's in neutral. Crank my motor up. Okay, as soon as my motor cranks up, I want to check my engine oil pressure to make sure it rises to its normal spot, which is when it's 40 pounds. If I have a oil temperature gauge, I want to look at it and make sure that it starts to rise. Looking at my water temperature gauge, it's at 100 and it's starting to rise, therefore I know it's working properly. Looking at my volt or amp gauge, I see that it's showing about 13.5. It fluttered and started showing charging, therefore it's working. Looking in here now, the next thing I want to do, I can let my clutch out now. The next thing I want to do is look at my steering wheel play. Power steering, my vehicle must be running. To check the power steering, the play in the steering wheel, I want to wiggle it back and forth and check to make sure I don't have more than about 2 inches at the rim of a 20-inch wheel, or 5 to 10 degrees. This one appears to be in good working order. I want to next check my lighting indicators. I want to check my left turn indicator that it's working, my right turn indicator that it's working, my four-way flasher indicators are working. Turn my lights on, hit my dimmer switch, and check that my high beam indicator is working. All appears to be in good working order. Next, I want to check my city horn. My city horn appears to be inoperable. My air horn appears to be working. Next, I want to look at my mirrors. I see that my mirrors are clean. They're properly adjusted for my field of vision. There's no illegal stickers or objects on the mirrors. Looking at the windshield, they're both clean. They're not cracked or broken. There's no smoking around the edges of the glass. There's no illegal stickers on the windshield. Next, I want to go to my windshield wiper. I want to turn them on and show you that the left windshield wiper is in good working order. It is making good contact with the windshield. The blade is not cracked or broken, and the arm is securely attached. I want to look at the right one. I'm checking that it's making good contact with the windshield and that the arm is securely attached. And checking my washer fluid. I appear to I have good washer fluid on one window, but not on the other. Alright, moving on across, I want to check my heater and my defroster. We're turning my defroster on, checking that I have a good flow of air out of my defroster vents. Turn it back to the floor, check that I have a good flow of air out of my floor vents. My heater and defroster appear to be working properly. Next, I want to check my seat belt. I want to check that my seat belt latches. Nice and tight and unlatches. Also that the belt is not frayed or torn. It appears to be in good working order. Down mounted beside me here, I have a fully charged and properly rated fire extinguisher. In the compartment underneath the sleeper, I have 3 red reflective triangles, and this truck is equipped with circuit breakers, therefore I need no spare fuses. Okay, this brings me to my brake check. For my brake check, first thing I want to do is release my trailer brakes by pushing my red valve in. Next, I want to select a low gear, and I want to gently tug against my parking brakes, making sure my red valve is in and my yellow valve is out, so I'm tugging just against my tractor parking brakes. And give it a slight tug, and it seems to be holding properly. The next thing I would like to do then is to push in my yellow valve and release both my tractor and trailer parking brakes. I'm going to turn off the motor. I'm going to apply a steady foot pressure on the foot brake, watching my air gauges to make sure that they don't drop more than 4 psi in 1 minute. It has been a minute and I see that I haven't dropped more than 1 psi, therefore my leak check is proper. Next thing I'm going to do is turn my key on, and I'm going to start rapidly fanning the brakes. Around 60 pounds, I ought to get a low air light and alarm. At 60 pounds, I have a low air light and alarm. Now I'm going to continue to fan my brakes down and make sure that around 40 pounds, both my buttons popped out. You must make sure when you do your leak, alarm, and button check that you start off with the motor off and both valves pushed in. All right. This concludes my inside checks. I'd like to go outside now and complete the rest of my external inspection. Okay, for my external inspection, I want to start off making sure my mirror brackets are securely fastened to my door. I want to check that my door opens, it closes properly, and that my hinge is in good, proper working order. Looking here at my battery box, I want to first make sure that it is securely mounted to the frame and tight. I want to take the battery box cover off. I want to look in at my batteries, checking that they are securely held down in place, that there's no missing vent caps, and there's no excessive corrosion around the battery terminals. These batteries appear to be in good working order. Make sure that I get my battery box back on and tight. Next, I want to move to my fuel tank. First, I want to look at my strapping, making sure that both straps are securely fastened to the frame and around the tank, that they're not etching or rubbing the tank. Looking underneath the tank, I don't see any signs of any leaks coming from underneath or around the tank, and that my cap is on tight and secure. Next, I'd like to go in here and look at my frame. I'd like to see that my frame has no cracks, broken weld or repair marks. There's no missing cross members or longitudinal frame member cracks. Looking at my drive shaft, from what I can see of my drive shaft, I don't see anything laying or rubbing against my drive shaft. All the carrier bearings and universal joints appear to be well greased. They're not broken or cracked. Looking here at my catwalk appears to be securely mounted to the frame. There's no loose articles on my catwalk, and it's not greasy. Looking at my air and electrical connections, I see that my air connections are securely connected to the back of the cab, that my air lines are not rubbed, chafed, or spliced. Looking at my electrical connections, I see that it is securely connected at the back of the cab, and that there's not rubbing, it's not chafed, it's not spliced, there's no broke insulation. Looking at my glad hand connections at the front of my trailer, they're all securely connected and tight. The electrical connection is securely latched with the safety latch in place. Okay, now I would like to go to my front rear axle. I'd like to start off with my front spring hanger, that it is securely mounted to the frame. It's not cracked, broken, there's no bolts missing. Looking at my rear spring hanger, it is securely mounted to the frame. It's not cracked or broken, there's no bolts missing. Looking at my spring leads, I don't see any spread, cracked, or broken spring leads. Looking at all my spring clamps and my U-bolts, I don't see any loose, broken, or missing U-bolts, no loose, broken, or missing clamps. Looking at my torque rod, I see that it is securely attached to both ends. The bushings are nicely attached and firmly seated. There's no problem with the torque arm. Now, looking at my brakes on my back axle. Looking at my brake line going to my rear brake chamber. It's not cracked or broken or spliced. It is securely attached to both ends. The chamber itself is securely fastened. The clamp is in place. It's securely latched. Looking at my slack adjuster, it is in the release position. It is less than 90-degree angle. When it is in the applied position, it is a little less than 90-degree angle. Looking at my brake drum, my slack adjuster has no pins missing. The garter pin's in place, and when pulled by hand, it has less than 1 inch of free play. Looking at the brake drum, from what I can see of the brake drum, there's no cracks, no welds or repair marks. Looking at the brake shoes, they're not worn dangerously thin. They don't have any oil or grease contaminants on it. Okay, moving down here to my wheels. First thing I want to look at is that I have at least 2 30-second tread in the deepest groove on both tires. I don't see any damage to the inside or outside sidewall of both tires. Both tires were checked with an air gauge this morning. They were at 100 psi or manufacturer standards. Looking at the valve stems, I don't see any cracked, broken, or missing valve stems, and the caps are on tight. Looking in between these bud wheels, I see that they're not rubbing or touching, and there's no foreign objects trapped in between the wheels. Appear to be in good working order. Looking here at the outside of the rim, looking at the inside and outside of both rims, I don't see any cracks, weld, or repair marks. All my lug nuts are present and tight. There's no cracks between the lug bolt holes. There's no rust trails that would indicate a loose lug nut. Looking at my axle mounting bolts, all my nuts are in place and tight, and I see no signs of leakage out of my axle seal. Moving to my rear axle. axle. Looking at my front spring hanger and my rear spring hanger, I see that they are securely attached to the frame. There's no cracks, missing, or pieces, no loose bolts. Looking at my leaf springs, I don't see any cracks, split, or broken leaf springs. There's no missing clamps. My U-bolts are secured around my spring to my axle housing. Looking here at my torque rod for my rear axle, it is securely mounted at both ends. There's no missing bushing. Appears to be in good working order. Looking back here at my brakes on my rear axle, I'm looking at my brake lines, that they're securely connected at both ends, that are not rubbed, chafed, or spliced, appear to be in good working order. Looking at my brake chamber, I see my clamps and bands are tied around my brake chamber. It is securely mounted, there's no broken or missing pieces. My brake chamber appears to be in good working order. Looking at my slack adjuster, I see it is in the applied position, a little less than 90-degree angle in the applied position. In the release position, it should be a little more than 90-degree angle. Looking at my brake drum, I see that there's no cracks, weld or repair marks to my brake drum, that my brake shoes are not worn dangerously thin or no oil or grease contaminants. Also on my slack adjuster, I don't have any broke or missing pieces. All my nuts and carter pins are in place. All right, I'd like to move back out here to my wheels. At my tires on my rear axle, I see I have at least 2 30-seconds of rubber in the deepest groove. Looking at the inside and outside sidewall of both tires, I don't see any cracks, bruises, bumps, bubbles, or lacerations, or sidewall defects. Both of these tires were checked with an air gauge and they were at 100 pounds or manufacturer's recommended standards. Looking in between each tire, I don't see anything wedged in between the tires. There are no foreign objects. They're not rubbing or touching. Looking at the valve stem, I don't see any cracked, broken, or bent valve stems. It does have a safety cap. Looking at the inside and outside of both the rims, I don't see any cracks, weld or repair marks. Looking at my lug nuts, all my lug nuts are present and tight. There's no rust trails that would indicate a loose lug nut. There's no cracks between the lug bolt holes. Looking at my axle mounting nuts, I see they're all present and tight. There appears to be no damage to the axle mounting assembly, and there appears to be no leakage out of my axle gasket. Looking here at the back of my truck, I see that my lights are properly mounted and the proper color, red to the rear. And they also incorporate the reflectors in the light lens. Okay, next I would like to check my fifth wheel. I want to start off back here by looking in my fifth wheel. I want to look to see that the jaws are securely locked around the fifth wheel, that the kingpin appears to be true and straight, and that the apron of the trailer is flat. There's no cracked, broken, or missing pieces to the apron, and that there is no gap between the apron and the top of the fifth wheel. Looking here, I want to check that the platform area has no oblonging of the hole, and there's no cracks, weld, or repair marks to the platform area. Looking here at my release arm, it is a one-piece release arm, therefore it does not have an external safety latch, and it is properly in the lock position. I want to look here at my fifth wheel slide lock. It is completely locked in place. All the channel and locking mechanism appears to be in good working order. And the last thing I want to check is that my fifth wheel is mounted to my frame, and my fifth wheel slide assembly is mounted to my frame. It is all the nuts and bolts are in place. There's no missing ones, no rust trails that would indicate a loose bolt. Fifth wheel appears to be in good working order. All right, I'd like to start with my trailer now. I'm looking at the header board of my trailer. I'm looking for any stress, cracks, or holes in the front of my trailer. It appears to be true and sound. Looking down the side of my trailer, I'm looking for any structural damage down the side of my trailer. I do see a couple of with no structural damage. Also looking down the side of my trailer, I'm looking at all my marker and clearance lights and reflectors. I see that the front ones are properly mounted and they are the proper color, amber to the front. As I come down, I want to look at the side ones, that they're properly mounted in the proper color, amber to the side and red to the rear. Looking at my landing gear, I see that it is securely attached to the bottom of the trailer, that the handle is in the proper holding position, and that wrenches are securely attached, and it is all the way in the up position. Looking at all my cross members across the floor of my trailer, I don't see any cracks, broken or missing cross members. I don't see any holes in the floor of the trailer. I don't see any fluid that would indicate a leak in the hole or in the floor of the trailer that would indicate damage to the floor. Here at the back of the trailer, I want to check that my tandem slide is in the lock position, the release handle is in the lock position, safety latch is in. Also looking out here at my pins to make sure they're protruding through the hole and that my tandem slide is in the lock position. Next, I'm going to start here with my front spring hanger, and looking back at my rear spring hanger, I see that they are both securely attached to the frame of the trailer. There's no crack, broken, or missing pieces. Looking here at my spring leaves, I see there's no crack, broken, or missing spring leaves. That my U-bolts are secured around my spring leaf to the axle, and that there's no missing bolts or pieces. Also looking here at my torque rod, that it is securely attached to both ends. There's no crack or broken or missing pieces, and all the nuts are properly tight. Looking here at my air lines coming to my brake chamber, I see that they are securely attached to both ends. They're not rubbed or chafed or spliced. My brake chamber itself is securely attached. All the pins are in place, all the brackets, and there's no missing pieces. Looking in here at my slack adjuster, I see that it is properly mounted. The pin and the Carter keys in place with no broken or missing pieces. It is in the applied position, a little less than 90-degree angle. Looking in here at my brake drum, I see no crack, broken, or missing pieces on my brake drum. There's no weld or repair marks. Looking at my brake shoes, I see that they're not worn dangerously thin. There is no oil or grease contaminants on my brake shoes. Appears to be in good, proper working order. Moving out here to my tires. Okay, starting out here with my front set of tires here, I'm looking at the tread depth to make sure there's at least 2/32 tread in the deepest groove. Looking at the inside and outside sidewalls of both tires, there's no cracks, bumps, bruises, or blemishes. All appear to be in good working order. The tires were checked with an air gauge this morning, and they do have 100 pounds of pressure in them. Looking at the valve stems, there's no crack, broken, or missing valve stems. Looking in between these dual tires, I see that they're adequately spaced apart. They're not rubbing or touching. There's no foreign materials trapped in between the tires. Looking in here at the rims, looking at the inside and outside of both rims, I'm looking for any weld or repair marks, any bent rims, or any damage that could cause a problem to the rim. And they appear to be free of none. Looking here at the lug nuts, they all appear to be present and tight. There's no rust trails indicating a loose lug nut. There's no cracks in between the lug bolt holes. And looking here at my hub oil seal, it appears to be securely mounted, it's not leaking, and it has a proper level of oil. Moving to my back axle. Here again I want to start with my front spring hanger and my rear spring hanger. They're securely mounted to the trailer. There's no cracks, weld, or repair marks. Looking here at my leaf springs, there's no crack, broken, or missing spring leads, no spread spring leads. All my U-bolts are secured around the springs to the axle, and there is no broken or missing clamps. Looking under here at my brakes, I'm looking at my airline leading to my brake chamber. It's not rubbed or chafed or spliced, securely mounted at both ends. My brake chamber is securely mounted The clamps are in place. Looking at my slack adjuster, all the nuts and quarter pins are in place. It is securely mounted. It is in the applied position, a little less than a 90-degree angle. Slack adjuster appears to be in good working order. Looking at my brake drum, I see no crack, broken or missing pieces, no weld or repair marks. Looking at my brake shoes, they're not worn dangerously thin. There's no oil or grease contaminant on my brake shoes. Looking here at my two tires, I see that there is at least 2/32 tread in the deepest groove. Looking at the inside and outside sidewall of both tires, there are no rubbing, no chafing, no cracks, no cuts, no lacerations. Sidewalls appear to be in good working order. Both these tires were checked with an air gauge this morning. They were at 100 psi, or manufacturer's recommended standards. Looking between the tires, they're not rubbing or touching. There's no foreign objects wedged in between the tires. Looking here at my valve stem, it's straight, it's not cracked, broken, or missing. Appears to be in good working order. Looking in here at the rims, looking at the inside and outside of both rims, appears to be no cracks, no weld or repair marks. Looking at my lug bolts, all my lug nuts appear to be in good proper order. They're there, they're tight, there's no rust trails that would indicate a loose lug nut. There's no crack between the lug bolt holes. The hub oil seal appears to be tight, there's no sign of any leakage, and it does have the proper fluid. Looking here at my mud flap, it's properly mounted to the frame of my trailer, and it's not rubbing, it's not torn, and it's not hanging loose. Mud flap appears to be in good working order. I'm missing a marker light lens cover here. It should be red. I do have my red reflector. Looking here at the back of my truck, I want to look at all my hinge pins holding my doors on. I see they are properly mounted and in place. I want to check that my door opens and closes, and the safety latch is in good operable shape. Looking here at all my lights, I notice they are the proper color. They are red to the rear. All my reflectors are proper color. They are red to the rear. They are all properly mounted and clean. Now, Mr. Examiner, I'd like to do my light check at this point. If you would mind standing here and watching my lights on the rear of my trailer and the rear of my tractor and tell me if they're operating when I turn them on, I will turn them on and call the name out to you. I'm going to look back there until we're back. Okay, Mr. Examiner, I should have a left trailer. I should have four-way flashers on my tractor and my trailer. I should have brake lights on my tractor and my trailer. I should have parking lights at the rear of my trailer, the rear of my tractor. Also, all my side marker lights on the front, the side, the rear, the top, and the bottom of my trailer should be working. Now, Mr. Examiner, I'd like to go to the front, check that the lights on the front of my truck are working. I noticed that on both my turn signals I have red to the rear, amber to the front. The rest of my lights on the front are amber or clear. High and my low beams will turn my light switch on, but to get my high beams on these freight lighters, I have to turn my key on. And also, my dimmer switch is either located on a push button on the end of the turn signal, a push button on the end of the turn signal, or a lever that pulls up and down on the end of the turn signal. Mr. Examiner, I should have low beam headlights. I should have high beam headlights. High beam headlights. Low beam headlights. I should have a left turn signal. Should have a right turn signal. And my side ID lights are the proper color, properly mounted and working. Mr. Examiner, that will conclude the inspection on this vehicle.